Okay, so this video will look at the next section within a lab report, which is the method section. Now this section should be written so that someone else can repeat the experiment just by reading your method section. A key point throughout is to include enough information for replication. So try not to include unnecessary information that you don't think has any bearing on the results of your study. The method in general normally consists up to 4 or 5 subsections. These are namely participants, equipment, experimental design, procedure, and treatment of data. Okay, so the first part here I'm just going to highlight is the subjects or the participants. In here you should be explaining to the reader who was studied, how were they selected, and from where were they selected. Sometimes it's often sufficient simply to state the number of participants used in the study, so perhaps with a breakdown by gender or group selection. So for example here, we can just see, if I highlight this area here, it just provides the reader with a little bit more information about the type of athlete that was actually involved within the experimental design. So we have 3 football players, 2 basketball players, 1 hockey player, 1 rugby player, and 1 netball player. And it just basically provides a quick overview of what level that they can beat at. So in this example, it's university standard. The next part of the method should include the equipment. Now, for this particular example, the subheading is not equipment itself. The equipment checklist is actually contained within the protocol, which is perfectly acceptable criteria. The things that you want to consider are what equipment or instruments were used to collect the data. So, for example, if computers were used, describe the specific models of the computer and the software used to collect the data. In which case, for example here, the student has provided information that relates to how the subject's height and weight was measured. So we're using the specific stadiometer and contain within there's information on its location and its location of manufacture. For the experimental design, this heading, which is highlighted just here, is normally included only if you have an experimental design that is complex. So if you've used a mixed design with several independent or dependent variables. Otherwise, this information would be part of your procedure. So it should explain to the reader clearly what the different conditions are and how they were manipulated. This tells the reader about what form the experiment took. So, for example, how many people took part in each condition and what did you ask them to do, for example. In this particular case, the supplement group were asked to consume a creatine monohydrate supplementation for a prolonged period, and then a little bit more information as to what type of test was instigated was provided as well. So the procedure section, or the subheading for the method section, should refer to how the data was gathered. So were the participants run individually or in small groups? Were participants tested in a laboratory or in a field setting? How were relevant dependent variables assessed? Things like, did the participants respond using a questionnaire or a computer, or were their behaviours assessed using videotapes or trained raters provided? So try to give enough information for replication, but don't give too much information that would not be relevant to how the results were attained. So for example, there'll be no need to say things like the participants entered the laboratory and were told to sit down on the chairs provided. The last part of the method subheading should be the treatment of data. So in this area here, this particular student is provided information as to how the information collected would be treated. In this case, they were going to use the Microsoft Excel data analysis toolpack, and then would provide information as to how the dependent variables were tested, in which case they would use a software system known as SPSS.